We got lots of people logging in. Stefan, good to see you. Tanya, did I say that right? Yeah, I think so. Stephen, Danielle, Anne, awesome. Really pumped for this training that we're about to do. So the way we're going to run this is I'm going to teach a little bit and then get you guys to offer some interaction, questions, all that stuff. And then I'll teach a little bit, questions, interaction, all that stuff. Teach a little bit, questions, interaction, all that stuff. And by the time we leave here, I think you'll have a really good sense of how to initiate your live event program. So what I want to do first, just real quick, if you would, in the chat box, just want to make sure that the audio is good. I'm not using any headphones, so I just typed the word chat into the chat box. So if you just let me know if the audio is okay, I just want to make sure that before we hit the go button that we are good to go. Danielle says the audio is fine. How about for you, Anne, Stefan, everyone else? All good? Awesome. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we will rock and roll. The other thing we're doing, of course, is recording this. So if for whatever reason you want to go back and listen to it again, you want to share with other people on your team, all that good stuff, then you can do that. So let's do it. So today's topic, what we want to talk about are live events. And this is part one of a two-part training. And in part one today, we're going to talk about what's called sign up, warm up, and show up. And what I mean by that specifically is, first, I want to begin with a quick definition of what is a live event. And so a lot of times I think when we talk about live events, at least for me, my mind gravitates over to doing like a big event, like doing speaking on stage or collecting people into a workshop. And those are certainly qualify as live events. Live events also mean really any time that you are pulling people together in a synchronous environment. So conference calls, for example, we have some folks and clients that have used conference calls as a means to bring people together and ultimately generate leads. And another way to do a live event is a webinar. So depending on your audience and depending on your target buyer, a webinar is an example of a live event. So the live event could be speaking from a stage at a conference. It could be doing a workshop. It could be a conference call. It could be a webinar. The whole idea of a live event is just sort of a general definition that anytime you're pulling people together in a room and you're in control of that crowd, or you're in control of that conversation, that's what we mean by a live event. And so the training that we're going to talk about today specifically is going to talk about the sign up, warm up, show up process. And one of the things I want to do is just to kind of give you some context for this is, and for those who have heard me kind of talk about this before, the idea is if we think about there's a timeline that exists whenever we want to choose to do a live event. So here we are today, and let's say we want to do some kind of live event, or we know we're going to be speaking at a conference in the next 4 or 6 weeks. So let's just kind of put this event out here. Here is the event. And the event might be in, we'll call it time equals plus 6 weeks. So 6 weeks from now, we're gonna have this live event, or 6 weeks from now, we're gonna run a webinar, we're gonna have a conference call. The purpose of running the live event the right way is that it's not just about the event. What we wanna do is think about all of the time that we have before the event as an opportunity to get people signed up, get people warmed up, get them to show up, so that after the event, we can get them to take the action to pay up, which is what we want. We're going to convert those leads. And so today what we're going to be talking about here is first the sign up process. How do we get people to sign up for our event, come to our workshop, show up for our, sign up for our webinar, sign up for a conference call. Then throughout the course of that period of time that we have, in this case, this example, 6 weeks, we want to get them to warm up so they're excited. They're not just excited to join the event, but they're also excited to learn about how you might be able to help them solve their problem. The idea of warming people up, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, is getting them to the point by the time they get to the event, they're actually almost ready to buy your stuff, or they're almost ready to take the action that you want them to take. And then finally, once they're warmed up, we're going to just confirm and be sure that they do in fact show up. Because if they have been warmed up properly, we definitely want to make sure that they don't forget about it, or they don't change their mind in the last minute. And then the last piece, of course, which we're going to talk about in part 2, is getting them to pay up after the event, which is part 2 that we'll talk about in just a little bit. So today, basically, just as a really easy model, what we're going to think about is, yeah, the event is important, but most of the work and most of the benefit and all of the outcomes really happen from achieving the right sign up, the right warm up, and the right show up process. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let me pop back over to my slides. And so let's kick off with a little bit of a why this is important. I think the biggest problem, or the biggest challenge I think a lot of us have, is that we have an important message. We know that our perspective on our target market's problem is unique. Our ability to solve that problem is unique. And the way that we help our clients and our customers frame their problem is important. And we do that in a unique way. So we have this message that we need to get out there to the rest of the world. And I think that we also want to teach. I think most of us, at least the people that we work with here, like, you earnestly want to get people to learn about how they could be solving their problem in a new way. Like, you want to teach people about this stuff. It's not just about the transaction. You want to improve their companies. You want to improve the way they're thinking about how they solve the key business challenges that they have. And we also know it can be really hard and really frustrating just to get their attention. Like, they're really busy. The people that we're trying to talk to, the people that we're trying to work with, they're executives, they're busy people. They've got a lot of things going on. And even though we've got this important message, we want to do our best to teach them. Sometimes it's hard to get them to pay attention to us. And so the biggest fear we have is that if we decide to run some kind of live event, even though we've got this great message and we want to do the teaching, if they're not paying attention, what we could end up with is an empty room. You could have a conference call with 2 people, or you could have a webinar with 3 people show up, or you could go run a workshop and not have anybody come, or speak at a conference and have nobody come to your session. That's obviously the biggest fear, I think, for a lot of us when it comes to running and utilizing these live events as part of our lead generation strategy. So I think the opportunity here is, one, of course, we want to sell, get in front of a packed house of people, whether that's a virtual house or a real house of people. We want to make sure that we've got qualified leads, not just people, not just warm bodies, but the actual right people, the qualified leads that are going to be coming, so we can share our stuff, share our message, teach the right people that can take action. And we want to make sure that those people are then ready to take the next step after they've come to our event. And ultimately, what that's going to allow us to do is generate leads really, really quickly by investing a little bit of time going into these live events. Coming out of that event, if we've done the right work to get the right people in the room and enough of those right people, we should walk out of that event with a lot of leads really, really quickly. So that's the key that we want to focus on here with the sign up, warm up, show up sequence. So we've divided these up into kind of 3 key principles. And so before I do that, I'm just kind of curious, in the chat box, I'd love for you to share for yourself, if you're thinking about, or you've already got a live event that's booked in the calendar, when is that event? So, Anne, I know for you and your team, you've got a big event coming up in a couple months. How about for the other folks that are here? I'd love to hear if you have a live event that you're planning to do, and if you are, when is that live event? Just so I can get a sense for where you guys are in terms of implementing this as a strategy for your lead gen and ultimately for your sales process. So I want to pause here. I want to hear from you. What live event do you have in the calendar? Are you thinking about? Stefan's saying nothing set yet. Thinking about Q2. Danielle's been experimenting. Yeah, you guys did the live event just this past month over at JP Morgan, and you've got a conference call scheduled. So that's great. When is that conference call, Danielle? Next week. Okay.
Yeah, next week.
We want to accelerate this process, and we can do that. There's still a lot of work a lot of progress you can make. So this will be quickly something you quickly implement. And so for Stefan, I think Q2 is really a great time to think about this. It'll give you a few weeks between now and say mid-March to think through the content that you want to share, and then we start marketing that event somewhere, say middle of March, so that by April or May you've got this event all lined up. Great, thanks for sharing that. So let's dive in. So the first thing we want to do is get people to sign up We want to get them to hit the register button. And so a couple key things you want to think about on the sign up. So I'm going to talk about sort of general principles when it comes to writing out things like marketing copy and things like that. We're not going to get into the details of that. We've done some other training around it, and we can certainly work with you on your marketing copy. The marketing copy, though, is probably the most critical aspect to getting people to register, because if you're anything like me, you get tons of invitations. You're getting lots of ads on Facebook or things in your social media stream to sign up for this webinar or come to this conference. I mean, I signed up for a conference this past week as a registrant, and I didn't even actually go, even though I paid money. So there's like no shortage of opportunities out there for people to go and register for stuff. So what we need to do is make it compelling for them to, yes, take the action to at least hit the register button. And so one of the frameworks that I've learned and that we've used is called the 7-step sales letter. And so I just want to go through this quickly, and then as you're thinking about that next event that you want to run, then this is a really good framework to put to work in terms of writing out your marketing copy. So first is the headline. That's what people are going to see, whether it's on a Facebook ad or a LinkedIn post or a blog post. This is the headline. This is, think of it as a newspaper headline. This is the thing that's the job of the headline, is to get them to then read the rest of the marketing copy. And just like in sales that we talk about all the time when we're selling our product, we want to make sure that we're talking about the customer's problem first. So it's not about, here's the headline, sign up for this webinar. Here's the headline, come to my workshop. It's, here's the headline, and let me help you, the reader, the target person, understand that I know your problem. So we're going to talk to the problem. So that's the second step. The third is then agitating the problem, meaning like, okay, you have this problem. We both agree, I know that you have this problem, and now you know that I know you have this problem. We're going to agitate the problem. So what is it costing you? What happens if you don't solve this problem? So now what you've done is you sort of created this gap for the person mentally. Like, okay, here's the headline. It got me to read a little bit of the copy. Now the first part of the copy is all about the problem that I have. And if we target it correctly, then that person is going to then say, okay, this person understands me. Then as we agitate the problem, then they go, yeah, that's me. We start to get the reader or that target person to feel the pain a little bit. That's when we then make the offer, what's called the offer reveal. So that's where we say like, hey, we're going to have this webinar, we're going to have this workshop, we're going to be speaking at this conference to talk through some specific strategies that you can use to solve this problem. So it's create, stretch the gap, as you've heard me say before, create the gap, agitate the problem, then offer reveal, and then give them some specific stuff. What are you going to learn? Number 5. So here's the offer. We're going to have this webinar. We're going to have this conference call. We're going to be speaking at this conference. We're going to run this workshop. And when you come to this workshop, when you attend this conference, or here, bullet, these are the things that you're going to learn. And then 6 is the call to action. So to register, to save your spot, to get your seat, to come, make sure that you've got a spot in the conference call. Click here, specifically call to action. Click here and register. And then the last piece is what's called the PSs. Like, oh, by the way, if you come to this webinar, you'll get this bonus. Or if you attend our workshop, here are a couple of other things that you'll want to know about. So the 7-step sales letter is just a really nice, concise way to think about how to structure your marketing copy. Because you can, like for me, I use Evernote a lot, so I can just kind of have these 7 headings. I don't have to necessarily write the copy in order. I know what the problem is, so I might talk about that first, and I know how to agitate the problem. And I know at the end what my call to action is. Kind of work around and modularize, if you will, the content and the marketing that you're using. So when we're thinking about like, hey, we got to get people to sign up and click the register button, then using this framework, the 7-step sales letter, is the best way that I have found. And this is the same protocol that we use for our workshops, our webinars, and everything else that we do. So if you're thinking about an event and you want to put together some copy and have us take a look at it, and we can brainstorm with you, then go ahead and do that, post it, and we'll take a look. But that's the first step, is making sure that we're explaining what it is and giving people the right motivation to go ahead and take that action to get them to sign up. Another thing you want to think about is another approach to this, or another framework as you're writing your copy, or as you're emailing out to your list of people to invite them to come, is just 3 really basic questions, like why this, why now, and why you, meaning like, why would they want to come listen to you? So it's like, it's a very similar kind of framework as the 7-step sales letter. It's just a little more broad, but it's like, why are we having this event? Why are we addressing this problem? Why are we doing it now versus 6 months ago or 6 months hence? So putting some timing or putting some urgency on it. And then of course, why you? So this is the reason that you're giving this webinar, that you have this expertise, you have a unique perspective on the problem. So it's a similar kind of format, it's a similar flow, but it's just it's a way to think about, like, as we're writing the copy and as we're getting people to register, we want to make sure that it's not about like, hey, we're having this webinar, you should come. We want to make sure we're always positioning our copy and our outreach from the client's perspective, or the target market, the target customer's perspective. So there's the 7-step sales letter, which is very formal, and then just more generally, as you're talking to people or emailing people on your list, or even reaching out to people on social media or on LinkedIn, for example, you have contacts there. Just think about why this, why now, why you. Now this is very tactical. The reason I have a clock on the screen is people often ask, like, if I'm going to be running a webinar or a conference call in particular, some kind of virtual event, when's the best time to do it? Well, I've done a lot of research on this, and other people have done a lot of research on this. So I've actually read their research. I haven't done research. I've just read their research. And what people found is 11 o'clock local time tends to be the best time to run a virtual event of some kind. So, if you're here on the US West Coast, 11 o'clock in the morning here. There's also 2 o'clock on the East Coast. So depending on how big your list is or how many people you're marketing to, 11 o'clock in the morning here is mid-afternoon there, not too bad. I've also had some experience where we've actually done 2 like the same webinar twice. So we did this when I was at Altos Research. We would do an early morning time and then a mid-afternoon time, or a late morning time. So the reason we would do an early morning time is many of our people that would come to our webinars were in the financial market. And so if you're in the financial market and they're on the trading desk, once the clock starts and once the market opens, it's really hard to get them to pay attention to stuff, because they're doing their trades and they're talking to people and they're doing all the stuff they have to do on the trading desk. So we would actually run something really early morning for them. And then later in the day, we would do like a late morning or early afternoon one, because there are certain types of people on different desks. Some people that are doing a lot of trades every day, it's hard for them to get away. Other folks that are doing trades weekly or monthly, they can actually take time away from the desk. So it's just a way for us to hit more people. But generally speaking, 11 o'clock in the morning tends to be the best time, a little bit. And the second thing you want to think about is focusing in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. This is the data supports Tuesdays and Thursdays being the best days. Mondays, people just forget that they signed up for something, and then they get to the office Monday after being away for the weekend. And Friday, it's just like, I'm just not going to deal with this. I'm thinking about the weekend. And for some reason, Tuesdays and Thursdays, again, the data supports that's the best time to get people to do this. So those are kind of the quick things on the sign up piece, is getting people to hit the register button, positioning your copy in a way that you're talking about the problem, revealing the offer as to why they should come to this, and giving them a really specific call to action, and then giving them this, why now, why you. So let me just pause there for a second. We talk about this first principle of the sign up process here in this basic model. What questions do you have? What's been useful so far as we've gone through these principles? Go ahead, and just want to hear from everybody. If we're good to go, just write good to go. But if you've got a question, I want to make sure we pause here to answer questions about this first principle around sign up. GTG, says Danielle. Stefan says he is good. All right, then we will keep motoring on. Anna's saying affirmation of focus on the pain points versus inviting to the event. Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because we're doing a birthday party for my son this week. And like every time we get invited to a birthday party, as much as it is about him going to the party and having fun, it actually solves a problem for me. because it's like on a Saturday afternoon, which is kind of sometimes a hard time to figure out what to do with a kid. Sort of like, oh, this solves a problem for me. I can actually go to this birthday party and have something for him to do. So even though I'm getting this invitation to the event, it actually solves a pain point. And so we definitely always want to position people, make sure that we're talking to their problem, because they've got a lot of competition for the hours in their day, like we said. And so the more we can position this like, hey, we understand your problem and this is what you're going to learn, then they're going to feel like this is a true teaching event, not some pitch fest, which is the last thing that we want people to feel like. Nobody wants to sign up for a web demo of your product. Nobody wants to sign up for a pitch. What they want to do is learn about how they can solve the problems they have. So thanks for sharing that, Anne. Okay, so the warm-up process. This is probably the one I get the most questions about, which is, okay, now we've got people signing up for this event, webinar, conference call, workshop. We're driving people to our session that we're going to be speaking at, or a panel at a conference. Like, how do I get them from, okay, you signed up, initial commitment, but we could be 6 weeks away in some cases, right? So I'm guilty as this, guilty as anybody of this, where I'll see a webinar or I'll see some kind of event. Like I said, at the top of this training, I signed up for this conference back in January. I bought the early bird ticket. I was excited to go, but at the end, I actually didn't go. It's not that I didn't want to, but that's, the reality is a lot of times people, unless we warm them up and make them want to come, then it's going to be, a lot of times people just forget. And so we want to give them a reason to come. And most importantly, when they do show up, we want to have, I think of this as indoctrination. We want to indoctrinate them. It's once they've said yes to this event, they've given us permission to, in a way, sell to them, right? And that's part of this warm-up sequence, is we want to get them from, okay, this looks interesting enough that I'm willing to sign up for this thing. So now it gives us a chance to use this time as leverage to sell to them in a way that normally we wouldn't be able to. Because normally if you get like an inbound lead from your website, or you're doing some outbound prospecting, then that sales process very much feels like, hey, I came to this person's website and now they're going to be selling to me. It's a lot different if we get them to just register for a learning event or some kind of live event, and we can use that as a way to sell without it feeling like we're selling. So let me explain that a little bit. So one of the things that we do for our live workshops is, as soon as possible, as soon as somebody registers, then we just send them a personal note. I'll personally send them a note that says, subject line, nice work. Hey, Justin, saw you snagged a seat in the December 4th workshop. Nice, looking forward to working with you for the day. Right, so something as simple as that makes that person feel like, hey, person running this event is actually paying attention to me. There's going to be 20 other people in the room. Or if it's a webinar in particular or a conference call, they might feel like, oh, I'm going to be one of 100 people on this event. So make it a habit that as soon as you see people register for that event, send them a personal note. And this is something you can assign to an assistant if you need to. You could just do it at the end of the day. You could say, hey, we had these 5 people sign up for this conference call, or we got these responses to people that said, yes, they want to come to our workshop at this conference. Then make sure you send them just a quick confirmation, not sales. It's nothing else other than it's what you're saying is, I see you. I see you, right? And I'm looking forward to having you there. You're acknowledging that they've taken that step. And that in itself, I have found as being one of the very best ways to begin this warm-up process, because now you're starting to get into, like, making them feel like you're going to start building this relationship. And it's an easy way to break the ice between the sign up and getting them to the event, because what we're going to be doing over the course of the next couple of weeks between the sign up and the live event is emailing to them. And we're going to be progressively turning up the heat a little bit on them so that they do warm up properly. And so this is the easiest way, really low friction, really courteous way to break that ice, say, I see you. And then as we send the initial emails out following these, then they're going to be more likely to take action. So that's the very first thing we do, is just confirm. The second thing we do is we assign a homework assignment to people. So what we mean by that, and you can think about what this means for you. One of the things that we do is use a little questionnaire. And the way we position this is, say, in the case of Justin, say, hey, Justin, really excited that you're going to be joining. We're a few weeks away, and as much as we have what we want to teach and what we want to share at this event with you, we have a pretty good sense of what we want to plan out. We'd actually love to hear back from you as to what's most important. And so we filled out, we have this little SurveyMonkey questionnaire. If you wouldn't mind taking 10 minutes, fill out a few quick questions, that will help us make sure that all of the content that we're going to be sharing with you is as actionable as possible for you. And so I'm actually going to go out to show you how we do this on SurveyMonkey. So, and I put some other possible platforms. There's Typeform is another one. Obviously, Google has a form. It doesn't have to be super fancy. In fact, I think in a lot of ways, the less fancy, the better, because then it makes it feel a little bit less formal. So let me go ahead and show my screen. So what we do on SurveyMonkey, we actually create these little question grids for each different event. So this one is for a particular accelerator group or incubator group that we work with. And so twice a year, this Nordic Innovation House, they bring in startups from all over the Nordic region, and we do a little sales workshop for them. And so as part of our warm-up sequence is we send this little homework assignment and say, hey, congrats, you're going to be spending the day with me. Actually, Julian forgot to share my screen. Here we go. So this is on SurveyMonkey, and it's a little introduction. This is Julian, Sales Growth Specialist at Sales Quality, Sales Geek, to help us customize the workshop a bit for your specific needs. Take 15 minutes to answer a few questions. This is what the workshop is designed to do. And oh, by the way, and this is another part of the warm-up sequence that we'll share in just a minute, you're also invited to schedule a 15-minute sales audit with us before the workshop. And I'll talk about why that's important in just a minute. So what we do is just have a couple of questions here about the company, what the problems they are that they solve, what their targets are, what's frustrating for them. And then here is where people can book in a quick call. So having this as part of your warm-up sequence allows you to start collecting information from your target market, the people that are going to be attending your event. And that will help you to know who's actually in the room, who's coming to this thing. What you're basically doing is putting together this set of questions, and allows you to then start qualifying who you want to make sure you're paying attention to, maybe even before the event that you're having, and certainly after the event, because if somebody shares an information with you that meets all of your, what constitutes your perfect prospect, then you want to be darn sure that you're paying attention to that person in that live event, especially if it's like a workshop, if it's a small intimate workshop and you've got 20 people in the room. If you're like, wow, this person is ideal for us, I'm going to be darn sure that I introduce myself, talk to them, ask them more about the problem, make sure that they know that I see them, that they're not just a number. And so that's the purpose of that. Plus, from a warm-up standpoint, now that person feels like, oh, I'm just not like signing up for some webinar, I'm going to be one of 100 people. Like, I actually have the opportunity to provide some feedback to make sure I get the most out of this time. So that's kind of the second step in a warm-up sequence that we do. The third is, as you saw, there was the option to book in a sales audit. So what we do here, and again, definitely encourage you to do this as part of your warm-up sequence. What you're doing is you've gone from person just hitting register, and you may have never heard of or talked to before, they may be on your email list, to now you're creating a relationship with like, hey, great job signing up. Oh, by the way, I'd love to hear from you to figure out what you need to learn to make sure you get the most out of the time. And then third, if you can get on the phone with them for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and the way we position this is, hey, thanks so much for sharing those questions. You know what, if you've got 15 minutes, why don't we just grab a few minutes on the phone? We can talk through your specific situation, and you can ask me some questions about what we're going to be covering in the workshop. And definitely you can do this with webinars. You can do this with conference calls. The idea here is just to create relationship and warm people up so that when they come to the event, they're not completely cold. You don't want a bunch of faceless nameless people showing up to your event, whether it's on a conference call, a webinar, live event, conference session, whatever that is. And so we set up Calendly, and we just tell people like, hey, here are the times, book any time that's available. And we'll chat for 15 minutes about what you need right now and what we're going to be covering in the event. So again, it's all part of that warm-up sequence. And then the last things that we do leading into the event, we usually do this, and you can do this as well. Starting about a week ahead, is we've actually built out a couple of case studies that we kind of typed up as an email. And then you can see the subject line. We do case study 1 of 3, case study 2 of 3, case study 3 of 3. And typically these case studies address the core problems that people have and how we have solved them based on the strategies that we're going to be teaching in this workshop or webinar or conference call. And so again, it's all part of the warm-up sequence. The job of this warm-up sequence is to take somebody from a cold registration, like, hey, I want to come to this thing, to actually be excited about coming. And now what we're doing, we're selling to them with these case studies. It's like, hey, you're going to come to this event, you're going to learn these things. And when you learn these principles or strategies or techniques, they're going to be teaching you in this workshop, in this conference call, at that conference session. These are some of the results you might be able to get. So now from a pre-sell standpoint, we've really warmed them up, like, oh, I want to go from 0 to 500K in revenue, or this idea of like, yeah, hustle isn't enough. I'm working my ass off, but I'm not growing my company. Or how do I go from users to customers? These are all designed to get people to imagine like, wow, like this is really cool. I'm going to be learning all of these things in the event that could help me achieve these very same results. And again, it's done. Like if you were just doing this with cold leads or as part of your outbound prospecting or people that are coming into your website, they might feel like, yeah, this is pretty salesy. But because we had the reason of getting in touch with them leading up to the event, it completely repositions the way that this same sales technique that we would like to do completely repositions how they view it or how they frame it or how it's received. So before we get into the last principle here in terms of like what you need to do to get people to actually show up, once they're warmed up, just want to turn it over to you. And so in the chat box, whatever questions you have about what we just covered basically four big steps as part of that warm-up process. So one is sending a personal note to people once they sign up as soon as possible, just letting them know like, hey, I see you. Thanks for coming. I'm excited. The second thing you want to do is give them a little bit of a homework assignment. And that's designed to get more information from the people that have signed up, so we know who's in our perfect prospect profile and who's not. The third is then getting them to book in a short call if you can, just to learn more, go through their answers, learn about what they need from this workshop. Why are they excited to come? Why did they click register in the first place? And then fourth, giving them some evidence of results that they could achieve based on the strategies and techniques that you're going to be sharing. So that's all part of the warm-up process. So what questions do you have based on this 4 or 5 step process that we've covered so far before we get into the third piece here, which is the show up principle? So if you're good to go, type that in the chat just so I know. And if you've got questions, go ahead and type that in there. Either way, I got to hear from you. We won't go forward until we do. Good to go, says Danielle. Oh, great question here, Stefan. How much time to allow between the start of registration and the event? So a couple things that will weigh into that timeline. So I'll answer it based on the different types of events. If you're doing a virtual event, webinar, conference call, those kinds of things, anywhere from like 3 weeks is usually enough time. 2 to 3 weeks. Two is kind of the minimum. So let's just take, for example, if you knew you're going to be doing an event 3rd week of March, pick a date, March 21st, then you probably want to start marketing that event on March the 1st. So you want to give people enough runway so that they can get that in their calendar if they have any, because if you're like me, I think most of us are like this, like by the time the end of the week rolls around, my next week is pretty well booked out. I've got calls, I've got meetings, I might be traveling, I might be going to conferences, I might be doing workshops. The next week or even 2 weeks, a lot of times are pretty booked out. The people that we want to talk to are usually the busiest. So you want to give them enough runway where they go, oh, I have nothing scheduled for Thursday the 21st at 11 o'clock. It's March the 1st, right? So giving them the ability to then see that they have holes in their calendar that they could fill, that like, oh, I've got the time to come to this thing. So in the case of a virtual event, probably like 3 weeks is a good way to think about that. And that virtual event could be a webinar, conference call, that sort of thing. Now, if it's a live event, then that kind of depends on a couple of factors. So if it's a live event that you're personally hosting and you've got a venue that you have to figure out, maybe you're going to be offering food to people and you have to order and figure out how many people are going to be there. And is this just an event for local people, or are you going to be marketing this more broadly where people might be traveling just for your event? So our workshops, we occasionally have people that travel in from Los Angeles or Seattle or some other places that will fly into San Francisco to come to our one-day workshops because they see the value in what they're doing. In that case, you want to start marketing that out, say like anywhere from at a minimum 4 weeks, but probably as much as 6 weeks. Because if there's going to be, if it's a live event, especially if it's an all-day event or even a half-day workshop, then that's a much bigger time commitment than just a 1 hour conference call or webinar. So even if people aren't necessarily traveling, if you're going to be running a full day workshop or a half day workshop, you want to make sure that they have enough time in their calendar to say, okay, it's going to be on, for example, if you're going to run a live event on March the 21st, here we are mid-February, you want to start marketing that thing now, just so that they have enough time enough space between now and then to make sure that they can block out that day and be good with it. Now, if you're going to be sort of piggybacking on an industry conference, which is something that you certainly can do for any kind of live event. So it could be like, for example, we've done a breakfast before where we invited certain executives from key target accounts who said, hey, got the attendee list, we'll get the attendee list and then we'll just invite people and say, hey, saw that you're going to be at such and such conference. One of the things we want to do is we've organized a small breakfast of executives only. It's going to be an executive roundtable from 7:30 to 9 on the second day of the event. Again, even though they're already committing to travel because they're attending that conference, you do also still want to give them enough of a lead time, because if they're the kind of people that you want to work with, if they're executives, and they're coming to this conference, so chances are their dance card at that conference is going to get filled up pretty quickly. And so you want to make sure you get out ahead of that event. You don't want to be contacting them 3 days before the conference about some live event breakfast that you're going to be hosting, and then say like, oh, geez, I wish you would have contacted me 2 weeks ago because my schedule is already full. So in that case, whether you're expecting people to travel or if it's a long event that you're going to have like a full day or half day, you want to make sure you give them enough time. And even if it's around a conference, you also want to give them a long time, just so that you can make sure you get into their schedule before everyone else that's bombarding them with meeting requests get a chance to get something booked. So live event, longer period of time, virtual event, a little bit shorter, but in both cases, you want to make sure you give plenty of time to get people to, one, sign up, and then also give you enough time to do this warm-up sequence. Because especially if you're going to be doing some live calls like we do, like those things take time. Like we might have 10 or 15 of those calls, and even though they're only 15 minutes, they do take a lot of time. And so you want to make sure that you've got the time and the ability to book those in and host those and actually have those calls. So does that answer your question, Stefan? It's probably a pretty long answer to your question, but like everything, it always depends. Cool. Anne and Tanya saying super helpful digging the process of these examples, just starting to warm up and ramp up. And this deep dive is a good overview. Cool, thank you. Good to have you here. Okay, so let's talk about the third principle here, which is show up. So got them signed up. They're sufficiently warmed up. They're excited. They can't wait to attend. They know they're going to learn something. And now you've positioned yourself as this authority in this authority position. You've got the authority voice. You're going to be controlling the conversation. And we just want to make sure they don't forget, or make sure that if they have to make a choice in the last minute to go or not go, we want to make sure that they do in fact show up And so a couple things we want to do here. One is pick up the phone. And again, you can hire an assistant to do this. You can outsource this work if you do a script. And the script is really simple. It's like, hey, John, and we actually start doing this a couple of days, maybe like a week ahead of the live event. Hey, John, saw that you're scheduled, that you signed up for such and such event, webinar, conference call, whatever. We're doing final tallies just to make sure that we have enough spots for the people that want to come. And we want to make sure that you have all the details. So just wanted to confirm that you're going to be joining us for blah, blah event. Right? You can leave that as a voicemail. You're going to get a lot of voicemails. We always get a lot of voicemails when we do this. And in those voicemails, you want to follow up with them and say, I'll be sending you an email just as a reminder. So, hey, John, Scott here over at Sales Qualia. Really excited to have you. Saw that you're signed up for next Monday's workshop. Starts at 9 o'clock. It's going to be at the Laundry in San Francisco. Really excited that you're going to be there. Just wanted to make sure you're going to be attending. Because I got your voicemail, I'll follow up with a short email just to make sure that you're confirmed and good to go. If you have any questions, give me a call at blah, 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 and look forward to seeing you then. So you can do it yourself, or you can have team members do it. Hey, this is Steven over at Sales Qualia. I'm calling on behalf of Scott Sambucci. We saw that you're invited. So just picking up the phone, like nobody does this anymore. And you can do this even with a webinar. If you have 50 people that sign up for the webinar, it doesn't take that long to do 50 dials and 50 voicemails. You can assign somebody to do this. And that personal touch is so huge. We've had several people that come to our workshops that have said flat out, like, if you didn't call me, I may not have come. Like your phone call was the final reminder, like, wow, this is really cool. I want to come to this event. So definitely plan to pick up the phone and do this anywhere from 3 to 5 days out, maybe even a week out, especially if it's a bigger, longer event. You want to make sure you do that. And you can also play off the scarcity thing a little bit too. You can say, look, we only had 100 spots for this webinar because that's all GoToWebinar can host. So if for whatever reason you feel like you're not able to attend, could you just let us know, because we got some other people that were interested and we just want to make sure we save that. We want to give that spot to somebody else. Because now what you've done is sort of like this fear of missing out or the scarcity. Like, wow, okay, I got this thing signed up. Good thing I signed up, because it sounds like there aren't a lot of spots left. So number one is on the show up thing, pick up the phone. Number two is you can also follow up with text. We've had a lot of success with text messages. So as part of your registration form, ask for people's mobile number. And what we're starting to do is on the mobile number on the registration, if you just say, you give them a reason why we're asking for the mobile number. It's not like we're asking for your phone number so we can call you. It's in case we have to make any last minute changes or notifications, we can just shoot you a quick text. And so you can do the same thing. If you leave the voicemail, then you can follow up with the text message. Hey, Scott here over at Sales Qualia. Just left your voicemail. Wanted to make sure you're good to go to be coming to our event next Monday. Can I expect to see you there? So again, quick text message to do that really quickly. You can also use some automated texting services. There's one called EZ, letter E, letter Z texting, where you can actually set up a distribution list. So you can take all of your mobile numbers, put them into one list, and you can just text everyone out. I don't necessarily recommend doing that for confirmations when you're doing this initial outreach, but certainly maybe the day before you could send out like a broadcast text message to people that says, hey, really excited to have you come into the webinar tomorrow. Just wanted to confirm it's at 9 o'clock, it's at 11 o'clock. It's going to be here on GoToWebinar. Here's the link. Let us know if anything changes. So you can use texting both individually to confirm, and then also create a broadcast, almost like a distribution list on text messages just as part of your show up sequence. So that's the second thing, is using text, because what this also does, by the way, is it gets you into a texting conversation with people after the event, which we're going to be talking about in the next training. So if you're texting people before the event and they text you back, like, oh yeah, I can't wait to come, or looking forward to it, or thanks for the confirmation. Now after the event, if you're looking for a way to break the ice again, or maybe you're following up with a phone call or an email and people aren't getting back to you, you can shoot them a text because you've already broken that kind of wall of communication. You've engaged in a texting relationship with them. So it's sometimes the easiest way to get in touch with people is through text. So again, if we were doing this just in a purely selling strategy for new leads and you just like text them cold lead, I kind of maybe feel like that's a bit weird. But because we're using the event as an excuse to enable all of these forms of communication, now it's not weird. It's actually pretty cool. Like, oh, that's awesome. I'm getting a text to remind me about a webinar or a conference call or this breakfast that I'm going to. So that's the second way to help people show up is use text. Third thing we do is a couple of days before. So most of our workshops are on a Monday. So on the Friday before that event, we send out what's called the 3 More Sleeps email. And this is just it's a longer email, and it's just kind of a compilation of all the key information. And again, it's just designed to get people excited to make sure that they show up. And so, the first part of this email is just, a little personal touch. Hey, it's Friday afternoon. The office is quiet. What are my favorite times of the week? I like to reflect back on learning in progress of the last year, over the last week that I've made, and look ahead to next week. And next week includes you. And so it's all about getting them excited and letting them know all the preparation that's gone into the event, so they know this is an event. Like, it's a thing, right? It's not just like you're going to show up and start talking. It's been a lot of work and preparation. It's a big deal that they're coming to this thing. And so that's kind of part 1. Part 2 is then just all about logistics. Here's everything that you need, date and time. Here's the venue. If it's a live event, we always have a link to the Google map, because if you're anything like me, you hop in the car or you're going to get on BART or something, you have to like figure out where to go. And being able to just click and have that map available is really cool. If you're doing a live event, we always include transportation options, and just letting people know if you're going to be driving, make sure you give yourself plenty of time. It's in San Francisco, not the easiest place to find a place to park. If you want to take public transportation, BART is only 2 blocks away. We let people know about food. We don't typically provide food for our public workshops. Sometimes we do some coffee and stuff like that, but we just let them know, like, hey, you're going to be on your own for lunch. It'd be a great chance to take a break. Here are a couple of options around the neighborhood so you won't go hungry, and then what to bring. And this is kind of their preparation and what to do when they get there. So now what you're doing is getting them thinking about future pacing them. Okay, 3 more days to this big event. Here's what you do when you get here. Go inside, say hello to Julian and Stephen, introduce yourself, turn your phone into airplane mode, and turn yourself into learn and share mode. So what you're doing is putting them mentally into that event. So this is all designed to get them to show up and get them excited and let them know what to expect when they get there. It's a little scary, especially for live events, whether it's a breakfast at a conference or a workshop or some kind of speaking gig. You're kind of like, okay, I'm going to show up to this venue, and what happens next? What's going to happen? So here, if we're giving them, it's like a little bit of a work plan, if you will, of like, when you get there, this is the 3 things you should do. You're giving them visualization. It makes them feel a lot more comfortable and reduces the trepidation or nervousness. Because some people would get kind of, oh, I signed up for this thing, but I'm actually not going to go. Here you're getting them to visualize how cool it's going to be. And just by showing them the amount of time and effort, letting them know that this is an event that they want to come to. So, so let me pause there on the show up thing. So just to kind of recap: 1, use the phone. 2, certainly you can follow up with emails and texts. And then 3, sending out this kind of final email as a way to get people excited, let them know, like, hey, 3 more sleeps. We send it on a Friday because it's on Monday. And let them know that, hey, this thing's happening and we're looking forward to seeing you there. So what questions, comments, what's been useful in this part on the show up section? We've talked about sign up, we've talked about warm up. What about on the show up piece? Yes, we're happy to provide these documents to you, Anne. Absolutely. Pas de tout, as they say. Daniel's asking, do you overbook at all to account for drop off? So that depends. If it's virtual, definitely overbook. Pretty good, just kind of giving you some metrics, a pretty solid show up rate on a virtual event, like a webinar, for example. A good show up rate is about 50% or higher. If you're hitting 50% or more, you get 50 people registered. 25 to 30 should be showing up if you're doing this. You can certainly go higher. We've gotten it as high as 70, 80%. on our webinars, because, we do a good job of, getting people excited for it. So certainly you want to account for some of that in a webinar setting. If it's a conference call, so one of the examples I'll show you in just a minute. So Becky McKinnell, who we work with, she did this conference call strategy where she kept it really small. She purposely kept it small. She was only invited like 20 executives. In that case, you don't want to have too much overrun, like maybe overbook a little bit, maybe have 25 people committed for 20 spots, because what you want to avoid is a situation where if you have some technical constraints, if you have a webinar that can only host 100 people and 150 people signed up, well, if 101 people try to come, there's going to be one person who's left out. That's really bad. So you just want to be a little bit careful on that. So yes, overbook, but not too much. On live events, our show up rate has been like 14 out of 15 people, 12 out of 13. We usually at most have one person that doesn't show up to a live event. So especially if it's going to be a smaller event like a workshop or a seminar or a breakfast or a dinner or lunch or something like that, you're probably going to keep it pretty small. And so by doing this sequence, one, they'll be excited to come, and two, you're asking people multiple times, like, hey, are you going to be there? Can you confirm? If you're not going to be there, let me know if anything's changed, because there's only a group of 12 of us. We want to make sure to give that spot to somebody else. So overbook, definitely a lot more for the virtual events, a lot less for the live events. So Anne's got a good question here. At the two events they're running, there's a larger coordinator putting on the event, and as a result, there are other agencies and competitions in the room. How do we navigate those folks and send them the same content? So if I understand correctly, it's like multiple tracks going on. And so some of the people that are in these other sessions are targets for you, like, hey, you're going to miss out. Is that right, Anne? Did I get that right? You just want to make sure you get them that content?
I guess so I just want to go to voice because it might be easier. We have these events and like DrupalCon and the Nonprofit Summit that are run, like the Nonprofit Summit is being run within the larger context of DrupalCon.
Yeah.
In that space, I'm a sponsor as well as I'm the moderator for the event. And we have 3 other sponsors that are involved in the event that DrupalCon sold, not that I invited or anything. They're just as part of the package of running this event. So there's also attendees that show up that are agencies that are also in the room to get clients. So in the room, there's probably 70% actual people that we would want to engage with on this level and send these like no problem. But the other 30% of the attendees are other agencies. And I'm just curious, do we just kind of send this to every attendee, including these people, for just blanket coverage? Because we don't, just because you need to communicate, or do we kind of pare down some of the stuff about the intake, or I don't know how to handle the agencies that are actually in the room with us?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've had this from time to time where we've had other sales consultants will come to our workshop or sign up for stuff. And, if it's easy to figure out and you're absolutely sure they're a competitor or another agency, you can certainly take them out of the distribution list. Because maybe if they don't show up, it's okay. But generally speaking, I don't really care if people are going to get that stuff or not. I mean, certainly I'm not going to spend time talking to them on the phone or giving them they're not going to fill out the questionnaire that I send to them because it's not as relevant to them. One of the things we do with the workshop, the live workshop in particular, is we tell people on the registration page as part of that sales letter, like, this is designed for CEOs, founders, people that are running companies. If for whatever reason, after we look at your registration, if we feel like we're not sure if you're a good fit, we'll let you know. We'll hop on the phone. And so you're giving yourself permission to kick people out of that list if you really don't want them to be there, or you don't feel like they're a good fit. Like we've had, for example, sales reps at big companies that have signed up for a workshop and would just say, look, this is actually not for you, it's for this other audience. And we just refund the money and give them some other ways to get some other help from us. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Some of these people have like paid to play, and they're paying the summit price
So
to
they can,
come there, and they're already like an attendee of these events because they're also there from a business development standpoint.
yeah,
So I think if they're pretty easy to like find based on their email list or their job description, and I think we could just parse off a certain content track to send them, so it still has the functional information that we need to get them to the event because we can't uninvite them.
yeah,
But maybe some of this other stuff that creates more noise for us if they're not, because they're definitely just like not qualified people.
yeah. If it's easy to maybe have two lists, you have your
Yeah.
your real lead list, and then you have the other the other list. So the real lead
Yeah.
list, you're gonna send this whole warm up sequence, make sure they book in the
Okay.
call, answer the questions and all that stuff, and then the other one is just, yeah,
Okay.
I would
But I
do.
like also that if we have more control over like people that are attending to actually like discourage, people that aren't in our target market from attending and kind of taking them off the distribution list if we have more control of that.
Yeah, and we just tell people like, look, the content and everything else that we're going to teach is specifically for this audience, and this isn't about us. This is about you. We don't want you to show up and waste your time. So that's how we politely excuse people when we can. Now I know in your situation it's a little bit different because they've paid to play, but we should always try to position it like, hey, we're saving you a day, and we're saving you $150. You might get a little bit out of it, but it's just not really for you. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So just to wrap up, couple case studies. I mentioned Becky a little bit earlier. So she is a design agency. She works a lot with e-commerce types of companies. So she ran a live event that actually started with she actually ran two. So one was a conference call where she did this conference call. The theme of this conference call last fall was the so-called death of retail. And so in her segment, there's been a lot of conversation about how Amazon is eating the world and all these things. And so she ran this conference call where she targeted really specific executives from her target market, most of them local in the US Northeast, and said, look, we're going to be hosting this conference call. We're going to be talking about the so-called death of retail and what you can do about it. And so she recorded that and then posted it to SoundCloud. It became this evergreen kind of content. Then she took that content and then turned it into what she calls the Northeast E-commerce Summit. And so the first one she did was actually really small. I think there was 8 people in the room. So she kept it super, super small. And now she's running it again in the spring. This is a picture of the group that she put together in the fall. And so after she had a half a day event, she had like an introductory session and then 3 kind of small discussion topics that were talked about. And then she invited people to join for lunch afterwards. And so this is a picture of everybody at the lunch. And so of the people in that room that you just in that picture, she ended up converting, and we'll talk about the conversion piece in part 2, but she ended up converting 6 of those people that said that they wanted to learn more about how they could work with her company. And then ultimately she ended up converting 2 of those to paying customers to 2 different deals of $36K, so $72,000 of revenue. So, you're going to put in a lot of work and effort, but if you run it the right way, then, like I said, you get the qualified leads, people are ready to take action, people that really have a problem and they want to learn about it, and then the benefits can be really, really huge. And I know you're on the line. I kind of looked at your bad camp that you did, and it was really, the numbers here were really great, where you had 35 cards of people from the 50 that were in the room. So again, we'll talk about the conversion piece in part 2. But again, if you're targeting really well and you have really good content, then and you get the right people in the room, you get some pretty good conversions. And the whole idea is like, how do we get a lot of leads? How do we get a lot of business for a short amount of time and effort? And Danielle, I know you're on the line here as well. And so at the JP Morgan Healthcare Summit, which is a big event for them in their industry, they did the same thing, small event. I think there's 6 or 8 people in the room. This is a picture of Rachel teaching part of this workshop. And they actually just closed their first deal over the last couple of weeks with a starter package that they're offering. They've got a couple more leads that they're working. So this stuff can work if you do it the right way. It's just designed to, it all comes down to making sure you, 1, getting the right people to sign up, 2, getting them warmed up sufficiently so that they do come, and then of course making sure that if they signed up and they're warmed up, that they do show up. So we're going to put a wrap on this. As far as what you can do next, I always like to ask people, what are 3 things that you can do right now? So if you think about yourself and your company, then the takeaway, I would say, as we wrap up this training session, is sit down with with yourself or your team. Say, okay, based on everything that I've learned, if I've got, like Stefan, I've got this event I'm thinking about doing in Q2, what are 3 things I could do right now to at least get the ball rolling on that? Maybe it's around thinking about the topic and working on some marketing copy, for example. For Anne and your group, what are 3 things that you can implement for these events that you are going to be running? Danielle, for you, you've got this event next week, this conference call. What are a couple things you can implement? Maybe you can't do the whole thing. Maybe there's 1 or 2 things you could do to implement. So just, I always ask people to leave here, like, what are 3 things you can put to work right now? And then I want to hear from you as we roll along over the next couple of days and weeks. Whatever questions you have, hop onto the weekly calls, post to Basecamp, post to Slack, wherever we can do to help you out. Get rolling on this, implementing this learning. So once you get rolling, you're going to figure out what works and what doesn't, and then you make the adjustments from there. So we're going to call it a day because we're here at the top of the hour. As always, it's a hoot spending time with you. Thanks for coming. If you have any questions about this, let me know. We'll post the presentation deck and some of the resources, including the templates and other things that we talked about, over to the Slack channel, and we'll get those out to you in the next little bit. All right, everyone, have an awesome day. We'll talk soon. Thank you, Stefan. All right, see ya.